Hey, hi, and
Alright.
welcome to our first episode of Praxis Makes Perfect,
Hey
the
guys, welcome.
webcast.
Let's do it.
All right, for technical reasons, we are doing just audio for this webcast. We're hoping to get a camera so that you can actually see who we are. And speaking of who we are, I am Amy, and this is my cohort.
Raul, hi. Welcome. Thanks for coming, or thanks for being with us today. And thanks for being here on this is our first webcast.
Yes, this is our
Okay.
first webcast. I
Together.
think do you feel nervous? Because right now it's actually
I feel a little nervous. It
it's
doesn't feel
recording
natural.
us.
It doesn't feel natural, but we'll get there.
We'll figure it out.
We'll work out the kinks.
Well, I think it's weird because we can actually see ourselves being video recorded on this really terrible video that we're not going to show you guys unless we have like somebody calls for it or
Right.
something.
Right. So what are we gonna talk about?
All right, so our first episode we're going to be talking about the working class and voting and why you don't really see a lot of us when it comes to politicians and elected positions. That's a big one. Now, I guess the first thing we need to do is probably define what is meant by working class, because a lot of people are under the idea that a working class is just like blue collar people.
Right. Yes. In fact, your father asked us this very question about a week ago.
Yeah, and it was, everybody thinks blue collar is your miners, your oil workers, your uh,
Right. Your
people
coal
working with their
diggers,
hands.
your truck drivers,
Yeah, salt of the
your
earth. When
farmers.
when in all actuality, it encompasses a lot more than just manual labor. For instance, my occupation in retail actually falls under working class now. So we're
Yes.
looking at teachers. Teachers are considered working class. Sales, doctors. Pretty much at this point, anybody that isn't a CEO, somebody that's just a stockholder.
Yes, if you're not making millions upon
Yeah.
millions of dollars,
Yeah, are
I
you
think
are
you
you
can pretty
super
much
wealthy
consider
or not?
yourself working class. And I think there's some very good discussion to be had about what qualifies as working class, as far as like what the limit is economically, as far as what people make that would qualify them to be working class. To me, it doesn't really matter. Obviously, if you're advocating for policy that enables millionaires to stay millionaires and pretty much hoard all of the wealth. That's not very working class of anyone to advocate for that sort of policy. However, if you're advocating for policies that work toward a goal that will enable the rest of us to to have a economic equality, I think you can consider yourself working class.
And we actually, I pulled up some information that we have on this. So the statistics and stuff that we're going off of today, I'm pulling it from a specific study that was done by Richard Florida. It was looking at red states and blue states, and looking at dominant occupational classes, and he broke down working class into three major correlations. It's creative class, what would be your teachers, working class, which of course would be your more manual labor, and then finally the new one, and quite frankly the biggest one now, which is the service class, which involves
Yes,
retail workers, fast food workers, anybody in the
just seen
service
a
industry.
dramatic increase in the past 20 years
Yes, it's actually the biggest voting block it's the biggest voting block of the
in the nation, right?
no, of just the working class now. So it's the biggest. So of the definition of the working class, service industry is now the
Service
biggest
industry
voting
numbers.
block.
All right.
Yeah, and surprisingly, service industry and specifically retail employees are the most ubiquitous, meaning that they do not vote straight Republican, they do not vote straight Democrat. They will vote towards whoever has the more benefits towards the working
Yes,
class.
and I think that's what a lot of the talking heads and pundits on these mainstream news sites will get wrong many of the time. They assume that a lot of these working class individuals are specifically voting straight Republican or straight Democrat, one way or the other, right? Which isn't the case all the time. Not to say that there aren't outliers out there, that there are working class members on both sides that will only vote Republican and will only vote Democrat no matter what. But for the most part, I think we can all agree that, and the studies have shown that many of the people in the United States do tend to swing one way or the other depending on the policies that are being presented.
Yeah, specifically, this study was looking at why red states vote red, why blue states vote blue when it comes to specifically the working class. And it still is broken up. There are some working class positions that statistically lean more towards Republican view or specifically lean more towards Democratic views. Specifically, teachers lean more towards Democratic, while it was coal miners lean more towards Republican. But the fact is that what a lot of people don't realize is that whether it's Republican or Democrat, it's still the working class.
Right.
Yeah. So you have more of a chance of meeting someone that's a ubiquitous voter, which is the service industries now.
Right.
Retail sales, customer service, secretaries, stock clerks, personal care aides, carpenters, uh, bartenders.
Bartenders. Yes. We can
Hmm.
see one being represented in Congress right now.
Yeah. So we have this huge voting bloc. So the
Yes.
working
So
class takes up.
the point I think that what we're trying to get at is that the majority of people that have the pull, the weight as far as voting go, is not being represented in our Congress or any sort of our branch of government. Whether it's locally or federally, I think it's beside the point. The representation is needed, and it's not there.
Yes.
Bartenders aren't there. Carpenters aren't there. We don't have teachers being represented. We don't have doctors being represented. We don't have a lot of people from various fields that are not being represented that count as working class citizens. So how can we fix that? First of all, is voting practice.
Yes.
I would agree that voting is praxis. And I think there's a legitimate conversation to be had about these systems in which we vote in and how it can be used against members of various marginalized communities. But I think what's important is that for those people that are in positions of power, they exercise that right in order to ensure that a lot of those people that are underrepresented within that system have some sort of ally. They can help them fight within that system.
I think if we're going to go into is voting praxis, we have to look at the history of voting because I think that's going to be the biggest argument of it is that voting's a very bourgeoisie, it's very white privilege. It's a very privileged thing. It's not a right, it's a privilege now. And yes, a lot
And
of the laws that are being put into place are turning it into a privilege, even though it is constitutional right. You have the constitutional right to vote.
right,
So looking at the history of it, of course, we know if you go back to pre-Civil War, only free white men who own land and met certain religious qualifications. Uh, if they were a white Anglo-Saxon Christian, then they could vote. By 1860, all white men over 21 could vote. After the Civil War, we had the 15th Amendment, which states that all men have the right to vote, and that is in practice.
right. And that's it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's most black people did not gain the right to vote in the South until the civil rights movements of the
Of course, we still
1960s.
had Jim Crow laws to contend with even
Yeah.
after the 15th Amendment was passed.
So
Brings us to the
the
turn
Voting
of this.
Rights Act of 1965, which, finally everybody was a protected voter. And then in 1971, the voting age was changed from 21 to 18. So, looking back at the history of voting, yes, it could be argued that it
That's
was
just a
set
brief
up.
history of what voting
Yeah,
is, and I
that
think
was a summary.
that's to specify that's the a very Americanized version of what voting is. There have been various methods by which people have presented their viewpoints, and the terminology "vote" is just it's still a European term, but still the system of voting is very old in itself. It's not just it wasn't just practiced in Greece, by example, which a lot of people seem to attribute uh, democratic ideals of voting with a Eurocentric view of the world.
Hmm.
I think it's important to distinguish that, which is why I see a lot of people have a huge, not huge, but kind of they're kind of iffy when it comes to voting, especially people on the left because they see it as a perpetuation of an imperialistic system or or for lack of better words. Or that's what I've heard people say, at least on some people on the left. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I still consider it praxis if you look at it from a view of harm reduction. Of course, I'll be honest, I'm a white person, so I can sit here in my nice little privilege bubble and go out and decide whether I want to go vote or not. Because at the end of the day, uh, well, I don't know, living in the South as a woman, it's a little bit different
Right.
because there is legislation that affects me. But if I was a white male, I wouldn't really care. It's not going to affect me either way. Either way, I win. So
I think what you're trying to say is that for people that have had the ability to vote for well since the inception of the country, really, um, it's much easier from people that belong to those groups that have traditionally remained the voting majority to just say, oh well, nothing's going to get done, and we might as well get throw the whole system away and start from scratch, and let's see what we can come up with, right?
yeah,
And I don't my opinion would be well, let's say that to the to the women in the suffragette movement
mhm,
that were trying to get the vote. Oh well, don't worry about it. Let's just throw the whole system away and not worry about voting at all anyway.
mhm.
So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and yeah, that's what I was trying to come off as is, and you know that it would be important for you to vote it. They wouldn't be trying so hard to stop people from doing it, especially when it comes to gerrymandering, which brings us down to when you're looking at a national level, gerrymandering doesn't really affect it. But if you're looking at a local level, yes, it very much does. For example, the county that I live in is literally split in half between two districts because the county turned blue or more purple, so they had to split the county in half. Unfortunately, that's just how it works out now. But we are working on ways to change it.
well, whether it's gerrymandering or whether it's voting in local elections, right? Which local elections aren't necessarily affected by gerrymandering. It's federal elections that we're talking about. Either way, I think it's very important that the people that have the ability to vote go out there and vote and represent those people that do not have the ability to represent themselves,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's why you could see voting as praxis. Is
It's
that
not
would be
seeing
my
it.
biggest
I think voting is
is
praxis.
praxis. Yeah. So moving on to voting and the working class, which is something that we really want to talk about here because one of the things that we're trying to do is start to get more people like you and I into the electorate pretty much, starting at a local level. Uh,
And I know there are going to be a lot of people that ask, well, what qualifies everyday working people from running in elections? I think when it comes to local government, uh, citywide, countywide. Even I would even so far as go statewide. I think it's very important for the working class to be represented, considering we make up the majority of uh,
Yeah, we are
of the population.
52% of the population is considered working class, which was broken down into those three categories before. So it's over half the population, but yet 10% of.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but even the studies have shown that many of these positions of public positions, like for city council, for example, a lot of these positions are being held by individuals that have the funding either by traditional means, which means going
Oh, you want to know who our government represents, which is the rich. I mean, even down to the city
right.
council level, it is the wealthy. It is not the working class citizen, it is the wealthy. And you want to know why I know it's the
And
wealthy?
I think that's a trend that's can be seen throughout the country in every city, just about in every town, in every county, in
Yeah,
every
I mean,
state.
take a moment, go online, go to your local city council, and look at your city council and look at what representation is there. I mean, look at the federal level
And
that
this
we
is all
have right
public
now.
information.
Almost the entire Congress is made up of millionaires. We currently have a millionaire president. We quite possibly have the richest cabinet in history. And you think that everyone there is in it for the working person? No, they're representing themselves because we're a country of representatives. So if our Congress is nothing but millionaires, who do you think they're representing? I mean,
I think you
it's
can. I think we
yeah,
can all pretty much answer that question.
yeah. So we got to start. I mean, the point is that we got to start changing things, and it is shown that at a local level you can start to change things. Because right now, the one thing that is standing in between a working class citizen and becoming a politician, even locally, is money. That's it. It's money.
Money, man. Ever since Citizens United, unfortunately, it has become um, the way by which the powerful have acquired the ability to push their policies through.
Yeah. And because if you look at the statistics, and these statistics were provided by Dr. Nick Carnes through a city lab. So if you look at the city council members, where these are statistics broken down, if you look at working class citizens and city council members, that's 10%. State legislators, 3% or less, and members of Congress, 2% or less. There are 0% governors and 0% have been presidents. I
Right,
mean,
and I
it's
think that's of course that's out of the three categories of working class people. Of course, that's the creative working class.
creative, and so it's creative class, working class, service class, which make up today's was defined as the working class.
And that's a total of 52% of the country, right?
Yeah, that's 52% of all the citizens. So every count,
Population
yeah.
of the United States being 320 million, around
Or what?
320 million.
Yes.
So about half of that.
Mm-hmm. A little over half.
Okay.
So if you look at both real world elections and hypothetical candidate randomized controlled trials, it shows that voters seem perfectly willing to vote for working class candidates.
That's strange.
That's not strange at all.
No, what I'm saying,
Like you would vote for, yeah, they show that you people will vote towards a popular candidate, a populist
right,
candidate,
populist candidate.
and unfortunately, like
I guess the reason why I say that's strange is because uh, again, I think that's a reflection of Citizens United in the fact that money has become the biggest influencer in our politics.
And our economic system is designed that way now because you need to take a substantial amount of time, a substantial amount of money, um,
I think
and
workers just don't run
yeah, they just don't run because we can't afford to run.
because we're at home taking care of the kids if we're not working, or that
Yeah,
money
I
that we do have
mean,
left over is usually, for
or you can't take time off of work. You can't miss days to go to a political rally, or you have to make a campaign pretty much your full time job.
right.
And
And
if
those
you,
people that can self fund themselves, that are already millionaires and billionaires,
mm,
have the ability to just, you know, put their work or pause their work for whatever it is they're doing. And if they're just trust fund babies, they can ride on that money for a while and decide to run for position in whatever local elections or statewide elections, federal elections they want.
and and elites recruit elites.
They have the time and the money.
Yeah, yeah. So it was showing that some of the reasons why workers aren't running is that we have less resources. We don't have the network of money. Workers are seen as unviable options, which means that it's hard to get picked up by, a campaign for funding. The DNC or anyone for that matter. Even the RNC is not doing it.
Right, and I think what we want to focus on though is at least local elections, and I realize that people like us in small towns and throughout the country are not going to have the funding or the backing of the DNC or any sort of high level uh, funding mechanism. So
And actually, in surveys of candidates that were described as working class candidates, reported that they reported getting less support from activist organizations, civic leaders, and journalists.
yes,
Yeah.
it's up to us within our own communities to fund our own campaigns, to run our own governments in order to fund policies that will benefit all of us, and not just the people that have the money to enact their own policies.
Yes. And that's one of the things that I want to get going. We want to get going with these webcasts is kind of help to guide y'all into the political process. If you want to step forward and, become a member of your city council, become a member of the commission. Because I'll be honest, I looked at ours, and it is kind of diverse. We don't have any women um, on it, and it seems that everyone on uh, the city council, it's like a city on the board of directors for something.
Well,
but
ours is a traditionalist
but
city
that's one
council,
of
which means
the
it dates back. It's an old Southern traditionalist city council. I mean, it's
yeah,
gonna
and
have
that's and the
some
reason
obstacles
why
put in
yeah.
place by design. So anyway,
And the reason why I'm telling you this is because
ours
I want you to look at yours and see what makes up your city
right,
council.
because
I want you
ours
to
is
look at
really
it.
irrelevant. What we really want to do is it's and right, who are we to try to encourage anyone else? But I think it's essential to try to encourage each other, um, because as Amy pointed out, the elite are recruiting the elite.
Yeah,
Who's recruiting us?
no one, no one.
I think that's we need to encourage each other to take these positions and to fund each other and to make it a viable option. I don't think
We need a working class campaign.
we're not at the point anymore where we can rely on PACs and the unfortunate decision of Citizens United to help us fund a campaign that will benefit all of us,
Mm. So
whether it's on the East Coast or the West Coast. Doesn't matter. I think we can all agree that the majority of us can and should be taking positions of power in our own governments, in our immediate governments.
and, I actually did some research. when it comes to is voting praxis. Back to the original question: is voting praxis? It's not just is voting praxis. Is what you're doing when you vote beforehand could also be praxis. So one of the I put up a poll on the Praxis Makes Perfect Facebook group, and I asked what did people want to hear about, what when it comes to praxis, and praxis being putting uh, actually doing what the theory is instead of just studying the theory. You actually put the theory to work.
So yeah, into
Yeah,
practice.
into practice. So you'll have to excuse me. I've had a cold for a week. So, what you can actually do is prior to voting, actually do your research on voting. I believe somebody on Facebook made a comment that they realized that there was another candidate on their ballot that was a working class uh, socialist candidate, and they had wished that they had voted for them. They didn't realize that that's who they were,
I'm not sure
and I think
moniker is relevant, but okay.
well, if you're going to vote, don't you want to do your research before you vote?
Of course,
Yeah.
but whether or not they label themselves socialist or capitalist or any of that
No,
is
no, no. The purpose was there
beside
was
the
a
point.
candidate that more matched up with their beliefs that they wished that they had known was there, but that they didn't know was there because they didn't have time to research all the candidates on the ballot. I mean, look at how many candidates are on the ballot right now. How many people take the time to sit down and read through every little detail about what someone's platform or planks are? And it takes time to do that.
Well, we
And a
don't
lot
have,
of
depending on what time the elections are and in your state. Like, I don't know of anyone that's in the ballots right now until the primaries come up.
yeah, but I mean, even just there's still going to be a bunch of different people on the
Yes. So
primaries. Yeah.
before the primaries are wrapping up, as far as federal elections, well, what I thought we were focusing on was local elections and
Well, you still need to do that for local
of
elections.
course
Yeah.
that's what.
Know who your candidates are. I mean, what did they?
So when they have events, go out to meet them, and try to find out what their positions are on important issues. As far as I get that very many, depending on the size of the city, the location of the city, um, uh, the problems vary.
Yeah.
Smaller cities aren't going to have the same problems as bigger cities, obviously. Um,
Well, yeah, of course. So what you need to look at what your local ballot is when you're going to vote. I mean, look at a candidate's past work history. What did they do for a living up to now? You know, uh, look at your representation. Does your local government accurately portray your community? You know, and if you take the time to do this research, share it with other people. Let other people know. Um, one of the things I would like to do
of
is
course, you want
create
to
a
cite your
mock ballot.
sources.
Yeah,
Always cite your sources, and I think we're at least for many people in our
but I mean,
immediate
a lot
surroundings,
of
we do our due diligence when it comes to research.
yeah. But when it comes to local elections, usually they'll have like a bio that talks about what this candidate did. Too many people walk into even a local election and just vote a ticket and don't really know. Don't take the time to accurately research. That's what part of the praxis is practicing going through and researching and knowing who your candidate is.
So what if your party ballot doesn't have any working class candidates?
Then you want to contact your local party leaders. Whether for me personally, I would go to the Democrat one and tell them that there's no working class. And if it's a local election, and really it depends on your city as well. Some cities you don't register as anything.
And hopefully with this kind of encouragement, we can set up some sort of system where we can help these people that want to run for these positions that usually wouldn't be able to, um, either through funding or through the appropriate channels that we can communicate them with in order to have them run for these positions. Um, Again, what if the ballot just doesn't have any working class people? Just try running.
Yeah, I mean,
Try running.
it's, yeah.
That's the
And
beauty about the American system is that you have the ability to run. Like I said, we obviously there are problems that there are obstacles in place, mainly the funding issue.
mhm.
Um, but I think even local elections can be a goal that
And
many of us can set our eyes on.
yeah, and it is doable in smaller towns. Like it would be a lot less expensive to run for a city or town council position in a rural area versus a city or town uh, position in, New York City. That's going to cost you a small fortune to do. But
Yes.
here, for a couple $1,000, get some flyers printed. But actually, and this is from, I know that this is anecdotal evidence, but uh, it's
Yes.
also it's it has kind of been shown. I remember I saw something on it, but I can't remember. I just read the statistic in passing, but it was just shown that uh, people like it when candidates, especially in small town areas, like it when candidates go door to door and just knock on the door and talk to them. They said that is the best thing you can do to get your name out there. Especially if you don't have a big budget.
Yeah, go
Take
on.
a day off and just go knock on doors and introduce yourself and tell people what you are about.
I'd like to see where you saw that, but yes, I think that
Yeah, if I find it, I will definitely post it in the
I
link.
think that's a very very important way to get to know your constituency, your hopeful constituency. I think.
Yeah, I mean, you need to know your community and you need to talk to your community because that's where you're going to get your platform and where you're going to get your planks
And
from.
be honest.
Yeah, be
Be
honest.
honest. And people appreciate honesty.
Yeah, so yeah, you want to contact your local party leaders, and if you don't have anything that's like that in your town, then you want to go out if you want to do it yourself. And that's one thing I want to do with this webcast is show people how to do this, how to actually run in a city or town council.
Yes, and it
Starting.
depends on the state, depends on the city. So
Yeah, this is
we'll go
just
over.
a
It'll
rough
be a
outline of how to do it.
general
Yeah.
outline because every state has different requirements for what they need for you to run. But I think the main issue is getting people out there and encouraging them to run for their local governments, and hopefully that will inspire them to pursue higher offices.
Yeah. And this is the other part of the whole voting praxis is that if you cannot run as a candidate, if you do have a working class candidate that is running,
Hmm.
support them.
Yes.
Donate if you can, volunteer time to go canvass, phone bank for them, just spread positive aspects. And
Well, I don't know if positive is necessary. I mean, spread the policy that you think is necessary to get people to agree to that candidate's positions. I don't think positivity. I think the policy will speak for itself in the end. Um, Talk about the policy. Talk about what the candidates are for.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and let people decide whether that's a positive or negative thing.
yeah. So going back to running for your town council, if that's something that you want to do, then I would, since it's our first episode, then I would tell people to go online and look at what your current council is. I
Yes,
mean, look at what it's made up of. Do you feel represented? Do you feel like your community is represented? Uh,
and I think that's a very important question that you should be asking yourself first. Do you see yourself represented in your local government? And I think you can go from there. You can decide what needs to be done in order to see the changes that you want to see enacted,
yeah,
portrayed through through the candidates.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I believe that just about sums up everything for our first webcast.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you again next week.
Yes.
Right?
Hopefully, yeah. Hopefully next week. We'll be
Yes.
working on it.
We hope to
Yeah.
be making. We hope to make this a weekly thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for joining us and have a good one. Remember, practice makes perfect.
Yes.